You are listening to When Therapists Watch TV, where we discuss today's buzzworthy TV shows and what they can teach us about ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Bly, licensed clinical psychologist at Ellie Mental Health. So both the Netflix show Sex Education and HBO's Euphoria address teenagers, adolescents, the challenges they're going through, and a lot of the struggles that maybe are somewhat unique to 21st century teenagers, but not entirely. But one thing that they both tackle in depth is teenage sexuality. And I think when I was watching both of these shows, and I will say, even though there's a lot of similarities between these shows, they're also quite different. And I think it's important to know that. The way I kind of describe the difference is that if Sex Education was a person and fell asleep and had a nightmare, it would be Euphoria. Euphoria is just a much, much darker version, but they do address similar topics. And so today, though, what I want to talk about is teen sexuality, specifically where are we letting our teenagers down? Because I think it's fair to say that both of these shows really drive home the fact that we are not having the kinds of conversations we need to be having with our teenagers, and we're kind of leaving them to fend for themselves when it comes to figuring out who they are sexually, what they want sexually, feeling empowered to make good choices on their relationships. And so what I want to do today is really talk about what we can take away from those shows when it comes to having these conversations with our teenagers, and what we need to understand even about maybe some similarities to when we were teenagers, but also what are some things that are more unique to now that we need to start wrapping our heads around as parents, as teachers, as community members who interact with teenagers. And to help me with that, I've got a very special guest today. This is Heather Ridinger, and I will let you introduce yourself. Heather, tell us a little bit about you.
So happy to be here. So excited to talk about all the sex education things. Yes, Heather Ridinger. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have been in the field for 15 years. I'm a board-approved supervisor for LMFTs as well. My dream job is to be a sex educator for teenagers. Like, it's always been something that I've...
Get started. Today's your debut.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the show Sex Education and how it has just enlightened myself even of how to incorporate health education, sex education with teenagers. So I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I'm so glad you're on here. I think I'd forgotten that you want to do adolescent sex education is kind of your jam. So perfect. Now, Heather, like as I've told you before, Sex Education to me is one of the best shows. I honestly think everybody should watch it, because it's not just about teen sexuality. It's just about sexuality. It's about healthy relationships. It's about all of the stuff that we all, almost every single one of us, experiences sexuality in some form. And so I think it does a beautiful, it's an English show, but I think it could easily have taken place in the United States. I don't think there's anything uniquely British about it, except maybe that the Brits were clearly willing to do a show like this, and maybe Americans aren't. I don't know.
Right. Ooh, we could unpack that for a while. Yeah.
Whereas Euphoria, full transparency, I've only watched like 5 episodes because it's too painful for me to watch.
Yeah.
It hurts to me. I feel hopeless. I feel kind of despairing when I watch it. Whereas I feel like Sex Education, I feel like it's giving us some answers, some like, here's what you can do to help.
Yes. Yeah, there's a darkness and a lightness. Yeah.
But I'd love to get your take on, on these 2 shows. You can pick one or speak to them both here initially. But what were your impressions about like what these shows are maybe trying to tell the viewer? Like, what are the messages you think these shows are trying to convey when it comes to teen sexuality?
Ooh, what a great question. One of the things that stood out for me for Sex Education specifically was how much I could relate it. Like, it speaks to me as a young person, and it also speaks to me as an adult. So kind of that realization of like, there was no language, there was really no conversation around normalizing sexuality, normalizing humanity in many ways of like, this is part of who we are as human beings. And there's a lot of walls up around that. I wouldn't even say boundaries. I would say walls up around some of those things.
Walls of silence.
Correct. Like, do not talk about that ever. Where it's important and for safety, for health, for like all of these things that we're so like, you have to be so focused on that kind of thing when you are talking about sex, but don't talk about it. That kind of like contradiction.
Yeah, it's like one thing that I was thinking about with these two shows is I feel like as like most parents and teachers or even religious leaders would seem comfortable talking about the pathological parts of sex.
Yes.
I feel like we're fully comfortable talking to our kids about, you know, sexual predators and rape and unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases. But we don't seem to want to talk about healthy sexuality.
Right. It's a scare tactic in many ways of and that's kind of it. There's a scene in Sex Education where a woman comes in and they're talking to all the girls about pregnancy, and she comes in and just tells the most terrifying things about pregnancy and about delivery and about all these things, and they just sit there and like, that's a scare tactic. That's not going to stop people from having sex. Right. It's only going to freak people out more and then keep them more silent and not want to talk about the emotions and the things that are coming up when it comes to sex.
I mean, that's kind of, I guess, what both of these shows demonstrate is by not talking about sex, all we're doing is making it more likely that teenagers are going to have unhealthy sexual relationships, or they're going to be doing things, they're going to be using, you know, porn as their guide, as their education, rather than real adults in the real world talking about real sexuality and real sexual relationships. Now, with Euphoria, since I come at it with such a, like, I think you like that show more than I do, if I recall.
Sure.
But what do you feel like are the lessons in that one? Or what do you feel like is the message they're trying to send? Because I just see the message is like, it's too late, everyone's ruined. They're all going to die young and with all the STDs and all the addictions. And so I struggle to really glean the lessons from that one, but I'm wondering if maybe you've had a different experience with that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot intertwined in Euphoria of, again, kind of going back to that dark space of like, this is what maybe not knowing or not having education or not seeking out, meeting sex with curiosity can do, or that can happen. You know, I think we had talked before around performance-based, like teenagers being performance-based when they are having sex or where they are being sexual, and that being so different than being present in an intimate and sexual relationship or interaction. And there is this kind of like, these are the consequences that Euphoria brings up. I was like, these are the consequences.
Like sex education is saying, if we don't educate our kids, it's going to be Euphoria.
It's going to be Euphoria.
This is, hey guys, we've really got to do this. We've got to be having these conversations with our teenagers because they're going to be sexual. They're going to do this stuff. And hey, watch Euphoria to see what happens when kids don't have healthy role models.
Yeah.
Because they're going to do, like, some of those scenes are so painful with the girls getting like one of the first episodes of Euphoria, that girl's in that room with all the guys, and she was I think it was a virgin at the time, and somehow got talked into like giving a blowjob, right? And they recorded it, and it went all over the school. And oh my God, like those scenes make me want to throw up. And I know that stuff happens. Yeah. But I also feel like maybe if we talk to our girls and our guys, our boys, more about this stuff, maybe they won't feel the need to or they'll be more aware. They'll thought through these things a little bit better rather than being in the moment and all they want is to be accepted. Right. And so they're making those decisions then rather than having thought through it before. I don't know. Like,
well, even thinking about brain development for teenagers of just like, they don't know.
Right.
They're just doing the best they can.
And minute by minute.
Seriously. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I think back as in being a teenager of like, how I navigated that is like a blur because you really are doing the best you can. And I think Euphoria, I really appreciate how you said it's like a nightmare. I think there are lots of areas where it is talking more about the consequences, and it is talking more about maybe like less educational and more this is what could happen. And the dark, like there's still reality in both. There's a lot of reality, which I appreciate in both of those shows. But I think Euphoria brings up more of the darker aspects that, or the consequences that sex can have.
Yeah.
If we're not educated, if we're not in tune to some of those things.
Empowering.
Is
the word that comes to mind. Is the girls in that show aren't empowered at all. And I feel like what I love so much about sex education is you get to watch these girls become increasingly empowered. And you see the impact that has on them as they start. Like Amy is such a beautiful story of that. Like she's just, when girls start out feeling like their sexuality is only to please boys, is only to keep a boyfriend, is only to get a boyfriend, is only to be noticed and to get that need met of feeling wanted, and how that ends up just hurting girls, and that once they start to feel more empowered, they still like they're still loved, they're still wanted and all of that, but they feel so much better about themselves. But going back to what you're saying about the wall of silence, I want to spend a little more time on that because I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. I think both of us, I too was raised where we did not talk about sexuality. Sex was something you had when you were married, and it was bad up until that point, which is curious, right? That we expect teenagers to think sex is bad, 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 bad. Then you get married and suddenly you're supposed to think it's a beautiful, wonderful, amazing thing after having, thought it was a horrible, horrible thing through all your sexual development years. Yeah. But other than, religion is kind of the obvious reason why some families or some parents don't want to talk to their kids about sexuality. But I feel like maybe there's more to it than that, because I think there are parents, like I struggle. I have 2 teenage girls, and it's not easy to talk to them about sex and healthy sexuality. I would love to get your thoughts on why do you think as a society and as parents we have such a hard time going there with our teenagers?
Part of it might be our own experience growing up and being young and not having that, or not experiencing it, or having different, those walls of silence kind of put up. Part of it too is for, and I don't want to put all of adolescence in this category, but there is a space of like, it's hard for adolescents to meet things with curiosity. They still want to be in the group or part of, or feel a part of that. I think a lot of times, even when it comes to like performance-based, or like I saw this on porn, so this is what sexuality must be like, or this is what sex must be like. And so then I have to, there's almost like a performance of, okay, well then I'll act like that. Yeah.
This is what's going to be expected of me.
Right.
This is what's desirable.
Right. Yeah. Rather than have an experience where you're present and being able to be intimate with your partner and explore sexuality together in a safe space. And I think the safety is a big piece. At least when I reflect back on, I don't know if I ever felt safe, even amongst friends. I remember thinking it wasn't until like sophomore or junior year in high school where my friendship group, like my girl group, we finally started talking about masturbation. Like, oh, you do that? Oh, okay, good. I feel better now. I can open up more about that. I feel validated in my own sexuality or my own self-pleasure. So now I feel like I can talk about that. And I don't know if that is, and everybody's experience may be different in that, but that was my own of like.
Well, I don't think I heard anyone talk about it till college.
Right. Yeah. So like, that's an okay thing. Yeah. And that's what in sex education, that's one of my favorite episodes, is when Amy learns her anatomy and she learns how to self-pleasure, really. And it's like a whole, like, if you've seen it, like it's like an entire day. She spent maybe multiple days
of
just like masturbating.
Exploring, yes, her own sexuality.
Yeah.
And what she likes.
And how can we normalize that? How can we help people understand, like, if you don't know for yourself what that feels like, or how to self-pleasure, or how are you going to then tell someone else what you want or what you need? You're just looking at porn and saying, well, I guess that's what I need. I guess that's what's going to be helpful for me or intimate for me.
Right, so rather coming from inside of exploring and curiosity, it's coming from watching that and going, I guess that's what I'm going to like.
Yeah.
So do that, I guess?
Do that because I guess everyone else is, and then I'll feel a part of.
Yeah.
Rather than, and it may then vary. That's what I loved about sex education too, is it shows that these partnerships that these teenagers are choosing to engage in can be really beautiful and can be really intimate and eye-opening and
fun.
Present and fun and like exploring and making it not such a taboo, and so like taking down the walls of silence. Ooh, see, for full circle, yeah, like how to do that.
And yet, I don't know about you, but when I was watching that episode, and sometimes the episodes start with, for people who haven't watched the show, a lot of the episodes start with teenagers having sex or masturbating. And it took me a while to get used to that and not kind of, when I would watch it, and I would be like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I can't believe, like, this is so weird. I've never watched this, and it feels very, I mean, they don't show genitalia. They usually show things from here down or from the back or whatever. But I still found myself so squirmy watching that. And I know that if I'd watched that as a teenager, I would have just like crawled under the carpet.
Right.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I imagine part of it is just because it's kind of an intimate, private moment that we're seeing. So there's probably something appropriate in feeling uncomfortable, peeping in on something that. Like, but I wonder, do you think there's anything else? I mean, I'm struck by the fact that it's an English show. I wonder, even a show like Euphoria doesn't really go into a lot of healthy exploration of sexuality. And I wonder about that. Like, do you think there's anything American about our discomfort talking about, or even seeing masturbation depicted, or health or exploration of our sexuality depicted?
So much so. And I want to add to that of, it's not just heterosexual sex. You are seeing in sex education, you are seeing across the spectrum, which is lovely and refreshing.
And also rare.
And rare, really rare. And I don't know if that would, I'm trying to think, in Euphoria, there may be some areas of more exploration in that, but it's not an educational piece. It's more of, again, kind of, and I am generalizing, of these are the consequences, or this is darker than what it needs to be. So I really appreciate in sex education where they're like, no, like, I'm thinking of, I can't remember his name, Malik? No, that's not it. He's
French.
No, French. Other, there's God, I can't remember his name, but he doesn't want to have sex with his boyfriend because he doesn't know how to douche before anal sex. And even those types of conversations or subjects, I can only imagine people watching that like, whoa, but also like, like those are really important health, like safety factors that you do need to put into play when it comes to sex.
Which is, again, why I think everyone should watch the show. Is I saw that episode, and like, I think it was Malik who then like puts it up on a board, and he's like, this is what you got to do. And I was like, I'd never crossed my mind that was a thing. And then that's what I was like, they should just, like, I'm trying to get my 16-year-old to watch it, and she just won't. She's just like, Mom,
why?
Stop asking me to watch that show. Like, no, but you need to, like, it's such good information. And you're like, we don't have a forum in this country. We don't have a forum, and apparently not in England either. Right. Where kids are just all learning this in a healthy way, which is, again, why I feel like if you're not watching the show, like, watch it with your kids, or watch it on your own and have your kids watch it on their own in case it's just intolerable to watch it together. So that you know, at least that you know that your kids are getting that information in an approachable way, in a relatable way. And it's funny too, like they managed to treat it with respect and humor.
Yes.
And it's not, they're not bludgeoning you with it. They're really saying like, yeah, this is important stuff. And here are teenagers learning this and learning it from each other.
Yeah. Which is so relatable.
Yeah.
That's how teenagers learn in many ways, is and feel supported and validated is from one another. And maybe that's the part too that I don't necessarily see in Euphoria. There's a lot in Euphoria of turmoil in those relationships, where in sex education there's more openness to, or willingness to have those conversations, have those tough, uncomfortable conversations.
And to help each other. To really be there for each other. And I think too, the lead character, for people who haven't watched the show, the lead character is Otis, and he is the son of a sex therapist, and he ends up filling that gap of knowledge. So he's there to show, like, to help you. So because they are helping each other and they're talking to each other, but they're getting some information wrong. Like when was it gonorrhea? What went over like chlamydia? Everyone thought they had chlamydia, and that
the whole school was freaking out.
School's freaking out. And Otis is there. He's the character. Like, his function is there to be like, well, actually, there's more stuff here that you don't know. That misinformation that's getting shared. And he's there because his mom talks to him about all of this stuff very openly, and so he's sharing that with his classmates. And I just think that's just a delightful way to really highlight that someone needs to be the one with the actual knowledge. And who is that going to be?
Right. And then he runs a sex clinic on the side.
And he runs a sex clinic.
Where there's this, it's still very secretive, but it's very, I really appreciate how, so they sit in this like abandoned bathroom and Otis sits in one stall and then the other person comes in. And so there's definitely confidentiality that's happening. But it's really more around like, and in addition, Dr. Milburn also puts out like a sex question, like questions about sex. And so it's very confidential. You can put your questions in and feel okay about that, not feel judged or shamed for asking really natural, important questions about sex and about our anatomy and about how things work.
So how do teenagers, because obviously their parents can't put an anonymous box for their kids to put questions in.
But I don't know
if but like, you're going to know who asked the questions. Not very anonymous. So so I know that talking about comprehensive sex education in schools is so loaded politically. That I feel like going there almost feels like, I don't know, what are we going to do? Like
it's a battle. It's
a battle. So, but as parents, what can we do what do you think we can do as parents to make sure our kids, besides just saying, please watch sex education, please, 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 what else can we be doing to make sure to at least increase the chances that our kids are going to learn about healthy sexuality? Because it's not just girls that need to learn it. It's boys that are like, they get just as unhealthy a message around consent, around what they're supposed to want, around how often they're supposed to want it, around, what does it mean to wait, if you, all of that stuff. Like, I think boys and girls both get these really unhealthy messages around sexuality and gender.
And there's a part too, if I could add, of like in sex education specifically, this masculinity and femininity, they do a beautiful job, in my opinion, of pointing out the masculinity and how normal it is to be like the friendship between Otis and Eric is a beautiful thing. It's very like, it's actually more physical than you think it would be, but in a very friendship and like adoration kind of way. We could do a whole nother podcast on that part, but like it incorporates not just the femininity and like and that piece to it. To answer your question, I think there's, and this might sound very therapy or very cheesy, but helping our kids own their own narrative when they don't know like what it is, like they're trying to figure out their story, what they're doing, and so.
How would they do that? What does that look like on the ground?
My first thought goes to meet it with curiosity.
So you have 2 boys. They're still young.
They are.
But if you imagine them becoming teenagers, how do you see that? Like, what are opportunities that you imagine might come about where you could then help your sons understand their own narratives or explore?
I want to make sure that they know that I'm a safe person. And to do that, I think it is about communicating and following through in that. So letting them know that I am here for anything, if you ever need to come to me, if you murdered someone, come to me. I want you to be able to come to me and we can talk about that and we can problem solve that together. So having that kind of message can go across the board. My other thought with it is, if they do have questions and they don't know who to go to, that they have friendships in there, or they have the support that they need outside of me, and letting them know that that's okay. In fact, that I want that for them, because there are going to be things that they don't want to come to me to talk about. But to know that, I kind of go back to Dr. Milborn and how she navigates that, and it is like she doesn't do it well in many ways. There are some.
But she's trying. She's definitely trying.
Yeah. And you can see how Otis then takes that and utilizes that in his own space, in his own life, and is actually really gracious in how he does it, and really grateful in how he shows that. And so
I think Otis too. So his mom talks to him very openly about sex, and he can hear her having sex down the hallway with different partners. And so it's kind of in his face, and she's got genitalia and dildos and porn mags in her office. Like, so it's sex. He's just surrounded by sexuality. And you can tell that it makes him uncomfortable, that he gets squirmy. And when she's having these conversations with him, he's like, Mom, whatever. But then you also see how he retains that information. And I think that's important for parents to know too, is teenagers might be like, oh, Mom, why are you doing that? Or they're rolling their eyes, or they're like, oh, it's so cringy. And they're listening.
They're listening.
And they're retaining it, and they're going to use it. And so I do think that's important for parents to remember that opening up these conversations, and even like, in the car, I think it's the easiest to have those conversations. You're both looking forward. No one has to make any eye contact. And so to just drop a few things on a road trip.
See what happens.
And they have them, they'll be on the side looking at the window and like, okay, Mom, tell me when this is over. But know that they're still hearing it.
Yes.
And they're still absorbing it. Yeah. I think it could be a really important thing for parents to keep in mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think for parents also, us being aware of our own roadblocks.
Yeah, right. So say more about that.
Yeah. So like, if we're the language we're using is shaming, or don't talk about that, or that's inappropriate, or some of those things, kids hear that too, teenagers hear that too, and so then it's very much, again, the wall of silence is kind of put up, that we're not allowed to. So
I have a question for you on this. Think of this till just now, but this comes up in my sessions a lot with parent clients, with moms. And I was just thinking about like how, Otis hears his mom having sex down the hall. And I get so I work with a lot of divorced women who then are starting to date again, or maybe they repartner. And sometimes then like the partner will move in after some period of time, or they just start to spend more time at the house. And I get a lot of moms who are like, well, we can't have sex when the kids are, at the house, because what if they hear me? What if they hear us? And I even think for married parents, there's this, well, there's definitely for married parents. I think for all adults, we've got this idea that under no circumstances should our children hear us having sex. Right. That's like traumatic. Right. And I'm curious, as I'm thinking about Otis hearing his mom having sex down the hall all the time, that's obviously a little bit on the extreme end. And what are your thoughts on that? Like when it comes to our kids understanding healthy sexuality and us being role models in some way. Yeah. How does that fit in? Like, do we hide our sexuality from our kids? I mean, I do think most of us do. And should we be hiding that? And if not, then what do we share with them?
Right.
all the things you get to look forward to as your kids get older.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think of that?
My mind goes to my own experience with my parents growing up, of like how very closed door language, narrative, understanding was about that. Like,
I mean, well, those TV shows in the 50s, they couldn't even have married couples sleep in one bed. They have to, I think it was I don't think that stopped till, I want to say Brady Bunch.
Oh yeah.
Was all controversial because I think that's one of the first shows that had them sleeping in a bed. Plus they were remarried, and so like blended family. But anyways, they were really pushing boundaries all over the place. But yeah, so it was closed door.
Yeah.
Our parents did not talk about themselves as sexual beings. Mine didn't.
Right.
I'm guessing yours didn't either.
No, not at all. Even now, you know, I always tease my parents. I'm like, well, you only had sex 2 times because there's only 2 of us.
Right, yes.
This is me and my sister. So you only had sex 2 times. Please don't tell me about any of the other things. Right. But like, and then reflecting on what that brings up for me is, why am I so uncomfortable with that? Or why does that make me uncomfortable if my parents were to bring that up? Because outside of that relationship, I'm very like, let's meet it with curiosity. I think there's a level of boundaries that need to happen in that as well.
And that's the question. When is it boundaries, and when is it pretending that we're not sexual?
Right. Yeah.
And that's not opening a door to conversations. Like, I mean, this is a tough one. I did have a therapist tell me once, like, it's okay for your kid to know that you're a sexual being. Yeah. That parents are also sexual. Yeah. But I think trying to figure out where that line is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe my thought goes to age as well, of like age of development and how we're talking to kids about, like, my children are 8 and 6. And so even just talking about body positivity and like knowing our genitals, knowing, like, you know, like even like cleanliness and like those types of things are, I want to say normal, but normal is not the right word. That I would hope that people can kind of focus on as you're, like, you know, kind of like body development and that sort of thing. Where
and I think but that's more educational. I feel like we can educate. But like, what if your kids say, well, how old were you when you first had sex? Yeah. You know? Yeah. Like, when did you know you were heterosexual or bisexual or whatever? Like, when did you start to do that stuff? Or, you know, like, how do you, or how many, like, what if your kids, teenagers say, like, how many people have you had sex with? Like, how far do you go with that? How much do you share with your kids, do you think?
I would actually probably say, what a great question. Like, thank you for asking me those things, because that's courageous in many ways. Like, kids may not understand, like, that's a brave thing to do. And to meet it with honesty.
So you answer? You think you'd answer them?
Mm-hmm. I think there's definitely boundaries that you can put up in that answer. Like, you don't have to go into detail. You don't have to, you know, if they start to ask about detail, you can be like, well,
so here's, I was this age, we did this position.
Right. We don't need to go into that. But maybe more around, like, it was a lovely experience because I was present and I was with a partner that respected me. You know, talking more about the relationship or the person that you experience that with. Or
do you tell them about the bad experiences? Do you tell them about bad choices you made?
Right. This is what I've learned from this experience. I'm even thinking of safety-wise. You know, there have been experiences I've had where I'm like, I probably wasn't in the safest setting or environment or whatever.
Which is what I don't want my girls, because I'm the same. Like, I put myself in some really, really questionable situations.
Yep. And then, of course, that's where I think as parents, our brains go to is like, well, I did that. Oh, man, I got to let them know, like, this is not okay. Or this is to learn from. So I think there's absolutely room for not going into detail, but more around the lesson you learned from it, or how you grew from that, or even learning about, like, that masturbation is it's a really natural part of being a human being. And for many, whether it's America, whether it's what religion, whatever, has put up those silent walls, to let them know, like, we don't have to have those silent walls between us. And you're gonna make mistakes as parents. We just do. And so there might be an opportunity for you to talk more in detail and maybe say too much. And you're like, nope, I'm not going to do that again. Or
overshared.
Yeah, right. Because then they might just be like, oh, I don't want to talk about that.
Oh, now Mom, you've given me something I can't unsee in my head.
We're all done with that. Yes.
How proactive or aggressive do you think parents should get? Like, you hear about sometimes like moms getting their daughters vibrators for their 16th birthday. You know, like how aggressive do you think parents should be? And like, here, I so want you to explore your sexuality that I'm going to gift you this vibrator. Is that too much, or do you think is this better than maybe not saying anything at all?
I think it's based on the relationship too, between child and parent. Of could that evoke more conversation of like, I'm giving you this because it's okay. I want you to know that I'm a safe person, that this is that, like, if I did give a vibrator, it would be with context to it, or an understanding of like, this is why I'm giving this to you. It's not just to be like, I'm giving this to you and then we're never going to talk about it. There's an opportunity, I think, to open that conversation and to say, I'm here to talk about this stuff with you whenever you're ready. And sure, like a teenager's going to be like, oh, what? What are you giving me? Or they may be like, okay, that's kind of cool, or that's kind of, I feel safe in that space to do that. And it's also about, for me, it would be about reflecting on my own discomfort in that, like, why am I feeling uncomfortable in this? Or what's coming up for me that's uncomfortable? And do I need to lean into that maybe a little bit more? Or is there a reason that this is, like, is there a boundary there that needs to happen? Yeah,
I mean, I definitely find it to me, this is the hardest topic to talk about with my girls. And I'm surprised at that, because I'm a psychologist. I feel like I talk about this with my teenage clients all the time.
Yes.
We talk about sexuality all the time. And yet I come home and I'm not Jean Melbourne. I am not just putting it all out there for my girls. And I'm surprised myself with that, of like how much I squirm. And I do talk to them about it, but it is, man, it's so hard every time. And I imagine some of that is upbringing, just how I was raised. And sex was not something we talked about, but also there's something that feels vulnerable about it.
Very, very much so, because of the messages we've taken in and been told for many years. I just really appreciate how the show itself has actually shown some of those things of like, how do we talk to our teenagers about this? Especially as parents who are not sex educators, or who are not in this field of work as therapists, of how to open those conversations, how to even start a conversation, because many of us don't have the language associated with it. And so then we're just like fumbling around, or we just don't do it at all. We just don't engage in those conversations. I think a parent could just go to their child and say, I watched Sex Education. This is what came up. Or how do you feel about your own sexuality? Or how do you feel about your own body? Because there's so much, I think, even in like body positivity and all of those things that play a part in us being able to be open to intimacy in some ways.
I want to pivot a little bit, because what else occurred to me is that what sex education brings up, and I haven't watched enough of Euphoria to know if they address it or how they address it, is sexual orientation. You know, like you get the sense that Eric's parents know he's gay, but they don't really, they talk about it in kind of code. And one question then that brings up for me is, you know, on the one hand, as parents, you know, even parents who are like comfortable with their kids' sexual, like, be whatever, love whomever, even for parents like that, I think there's this question of, if you suspect your kids are gay, your kid is gay or bisexual or, whatever on the spectrum there, do you bring it up to them or do you wait? And if you because the way I see it is bringing it up to them can feel invasive, like you're getting there before they're ready. But then I worry that not acknowledging it is sending a message of I don't want to know.
Yeah. I think in my experience working with adolescents, I don't have adolescents yet, but working with them, they're they're good at dropping these little things. And if we as parents or as adults don't pick it up, it's gone in some ways. And so they're going to bring it up. It's just us being able as parents maybe to hook into that or hear what they're trying to say in some of those things. And maybe that's what I mean where then how are we reflecting on our own discomfort in that and our own messages of, do I want to open this up or have this conversation? I even think back to my 8-year-old, this was a couple weeks ago, came to me and said someone at school, one of his classmates, just came up to him and said, "You're gay." And that was an opportunity. I could have gone a couple of different ways about that, right? Who is that? Those kids, that's very protective, mama bear, yeah. But I actually met it with, what does gay mean? Do you know what that means? And we were able to have a conversation about more of the relational pieces, not the sexual piece, but more of the relational pieces of being homosexual, what that means. And so even at 8 years old, he has a different understanding than I sure did at 8 years old. And I really I'm grateful for those opportunities. But I think.
So maybe it's talking to them about it before they know what their sexual orientation is.
Yeah. Planting those seeds.
Yeah. That there are different paths that you might take.
Yeah. And that's okay. And I still love you and I'm still here for you. And this is a safe space for you to have those conversations. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's, there it is. It's just if we can lay the groundwork early, and that might even apply to sexuality.
Yeah, for sure.
Not talking to our 8-year-olds about sex, but starting to have conversations about not just, ooh, someday you're going to get married, or ooh, is that your boyfriend? But even just talking about, I don't know, being confident in your body.
Absolutely.
And as your body develops, and what does that mean? And what does it mean to have a boyfriend? And maybe that's where, as parents, we could be doing a better job. Is just finding opportunities, developmentally appropriate opportunities to talk to our kids about what it means to be a human. Yeah. And all the different messiness and beautiful parts and exploration and curiosity that goes with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's about relationships, really. Yeah. The overarching umbrella to sex is relationship. This is relational, and in many ways, relational with yourself, relational with someone else, and there's an intimacy there that I think that's the other part that maybe is blocked by this silent walls of that's not okay, and that's what it's about. It's about how we are connecting with ourselves and someone else. And normalizing that part, being able to say, no, that's okay. That's part of being a human being, rather than it being, you're not supposed to put that there or that, those types of things.
Yeah. And I think, so the last thing I just want to drop in, and as I'm thinking through this, is trying to come up with the messages as teachers, as parents, as family members. I think one thing Euphoria does just a real brutal job of showing is that the protective factor for kids is their parents and the adults in their lives.
Yeah.
And when the parents fail them, the kids flounder and spiral down. That really, the difference, I think the main difference is, I'm thinking, obviously there's some questionable parents. Maeve's mom is really, not a shining, but Maeve also struggles with a lot of that stuff. Yep. So what Euphoria really hits home is these kids needed their parents at very critical moments, and their parents either weren't there or they responded in the exact wrong way.
Ooh. Or modeled.
Really
scary,
really dysfunctional, pathological, and also illegal ways of dealing with sexuality. But I do think I really want parents to understand from both of these shows that that maybe our teenagers aren't listening to us and they don't need us in the same way, but man, they still need us.
Oh yeah.
And they need us to be present, and they need us to be there to catch them when they're struggling, and to be modeling some of this, and maybe being more open with it, and accepting our kids for who they are, and also as parents being curious.
Yeah.
Who is my kid? Who are they becoming?
Yeah.
How can I support and develop that person that they're becoming, rather than judging it or being afraid of it?
Yeah. Like, who are you interested in? Who are you talking to? Who are your friends? Who's important to you? What's important to you?
What's important to you, yeah.
You know, those are all things that, like kids just want, that's what we need.
Yeah.
We just want our parents to ask us about us.
Even if the teenager rolls their eyes and goes, fine, school is fine, I still think that they want us asking.
They do. They do.
I agree.
Yeah.
So for the audience out there, I can't encourage, and hopefully you're getting that from the two of us. Watch Sex Education. Watch it. Watch the show. Have your kids watch it. Starting, what age would you recommend? 15-ish?
Yeah, I feel like that 12 to 14-year-old stage is like, for adolescents, there's that, there's a lot of brain development happening.
There's a lot, yeah.
And
there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And if you find out your kids are watching Euphoria, get in there.
Yeah.
Yep. That's not a lot of teenagers are watching it. They probably shouldn't be watching it unsupervised or without conversations about what's in there.
Huge.
So Sex Education, I feel like most 15, 16, 17-years can watch it on their own. Yeah. Euphoria, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think there's more relatability in Sex Education for teenagers right now. There may be the again, that kind of reality-based, like, maybe that's what scares parents, is like, is this really happening? Yeah. Like, oh man. Or sure, there is some of that happening in Euphoria, like the darker stuff, but in Sex Education, it's really more, I feel like teenagers just could relate to that much more.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I always like to ask everybody first of all, thank you so much
thank you. I love
feel like maybe we should do another.
Yes.
We'll find other opportunities to talk about this stuff. But I like to ask everybody what TV show they're watching that they're excited about from the point of view of a therapist, or that they think has really good content for therapists to be watching and talking about with people.
Oh, what a great question.
And it might be you are the mother of two young boys, and it might be that like you're just not able to find that kind of time.
A lot of weird YouTube videos about like how to complete Rubik's cubes. So I don't really know.
Sounds very therapeutic.
Really therapeutic. It is. It's a coping skill. Sure. I've actually just been watching more Sex Education since we've been talking about it more. I have been watching Shrinking.
Yeah.
So I really, I think we talked about how like once you get past episode like 5, it really does kind of open up more.
More stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. All right, great. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
This episode of When Therapists Watch TV was produced by Ellie Mental Health. Miranda Barker is the managing producer. Jesse Stenbrotten is the technical director. Our production team also includes Julia Galloway, Lucas Mooney, and Tu Pham. A special thanks to Lucas Fellini, Nick Seeger, and Mel Springer. I'm Dr. Terry Bly. Thanks for listening.